Move over, Star Wars. Star Trek has its very own lightsabers, but which weapon reigns supreme? For decades, the image of a glowing plasma blade has been synonymous with one franchise, Star Wars. George Lucas's space opera gifted pop culture the lightsaber, a weapon so elegant, dangerous, and instantly iconic that it became the symbol of an entire galaxy far, far away. Yet while Star Wars may have coined the term and built a mythology around the weapon of a Jedi Knight, Star Trek has quietly cultivated its own tradition of glowing, melee-based energy weapons that can stand toe-to-toe with the famous lightsaber. And yes, some of them are even scarier. From the Federation's rare experiments with energy blades to the brutal melee culture of the Klingons, Star Trek may not flaunt lightsabers on posters or in toy aisles, but the franchise has produced a surprising lineup of weapons that look and feel just as cinematic. So, which Trek weapon could truly go blade to blade with a Jedi saber? Let's dive in. The legacy of the lightsaber. Before we get to Star Trek's arsenal, we have to acknowledge what makes a lightsaber such a phenomenon. More than a weapon, it's a narrative symbol. The Jedi's discipline, the Sith's rage, the eternal balance of light and dark. Its hum, its weightless glow, and its ability to cut through virtually anything give it a mythic aura. But when you strip away the mythology, what you have is a plasma weapon designed for both melee combat and defense against ranged attacks. Its closest Star Trek cousins aren't always imbued with mysticism, but functionally, Trek's warriors have wielded just as much energy and danger in battle. Star Trek's answer to the lightsaber. 1. The Bat'leth, the Klingon Sword of Honor. Let's start with the undisputed heavyweight of Trek melee weapons, the Klingon Bat'leth. First introduced in Star Trek, The Next Generation, this crescent-shaped blade was said to have been forged by the legendary Klingon hero Kallus himself, who dropped a lock of his hair into molten lava and tempered the blade in the Lake of Lucer. The Bat'leth is not an energy weapon in the traditional sense, it's forged steel, deadly because of its design, not because of plasma. But its cultural role mirrors that of the lightsaber. Just as a lightsaber represents a Jedi's bond with the Force, the Bat'leth embodies Klingon honor. Every battle is a chance to prove oneself, and every swing of the Bat'leth is steeped in ritual and meaning. Could it stand against a lightsaber? Realistically, plasma would slice right through steel. But in pure cinematic energy, the Bat'leth has the advantage of intimidation. Unlike the elegance of the Jedi weapon, the Bat'leth is raw brutality. It's less about precision and more about overwhelming force. And in the hands of Worf, or any trained Klingon warrior, it has carved its place as Trek's closest rival to the lightsaber's mythos. 2. The Mek'leth, Worf's personal blade. If the Bat'leth is a claymore, the Mek'leth is a short sword. First wielded by Worf in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the Mek'leth was Worf's personal choice, and for good reason. It's compact, easy to wield in close quarters, and brutally efficient. Here's where it starts to feel very lightsaber-like. The Mek'leth, unlike the showpiece Bat'leth, is practical in real combat. Worf even favored it during the Dominion War, where starship corridors and hand-to-hand melees required something faster than a broad, sweeping blade. Against a lightsaber, a Mek'leth would almost certainly be destroyed on contact, but in terms of combat realism, it's far closer to how Jedi actually fight: quick strikes, defensive parries, fluid motion. If you picture a duel between a Klingon warrior wielding a Mek'leth and a Jedi, it suddenly doesn't feel so lopsided. 3. The Lurpa, Vulcan ritual weapon. Fans of the original series will remember the Lurpa from Amok Time, the unforgettable episode where Spock battled Captain Kirk in a fight to the death on Vulcan. Half club, half blade, the Lurpa was designed for ritual combat during Pon farr ceremonies. While it's not an energy weapon, its ceremonial role makes it Star Trek's closest match to the symbolic nature of the lightsaber. Just as a lightsaber duel is often about more than winning, testing loyalty, fate, and destiny, the Lurpa fight was about honor, tradition, and Vulcan survival. Visually, the Lurpa duel also feels strikingly lightsaber-esque. Two friends locked in deadly combat with exotic weapons in a fight choreographed as much for drama as for practical warfare. The Lurpa doesn't glow, but in terms of storytelling impact, it carries the same dramatic weight. 4. Energy swords. Starfleet's experiment with plasma blades. Here's where it gets juicy. Starfleet has, on rare occasions, experimented with actual energy melee weapons that could rival a lightsaber in functionality. In Star Trek, The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, we've glimpsed energy whips, force pikes, and even plasma-based swords in holodeck simulations or alien arsenals. One of the most striking examples came from the Hirogen in Star Trek, Voyager. The Hirogen were hunters obsessed with melee combat, and some of their weapons incorporated energized cutting edges. These weren't ceremonial, they were designed to tear through armor, much like a lightsaber. If Trek ever wanted to lean into the energy blade aesthetic, the Hirogen arsenal is proof that it exists within canon. Imagine a Federation officer wielding a plasma-edged sword in close quarters against a Borg drone. It would feel almost indistinguishable from Star Wars' iconic duels. 5. The DK Tag, the Klingon dagger. It might be small, but the DK Tag is perhaps the deadliest weapon pound for pound in Trek. This three-bladed dagger, two of which spring out from the hilt when activated, has been used for assassination, ritual combat, and personal defense. While not glowing with plasma, the DK Tag carries an almost lightsaber-like quality. It's instantly recognizable, unique to its culture, and tied to deep ritual significance. The act of plunging a DK Tag into an enemy is as symbolic to Klingons as a lightsaber strike is to Jedi. Lightsaber versus Trek blades. Who wins? If we pit Star Wars' lightsaber against Star Trek's melee arsenal in raw power, the lightsaber wins every time. Plasma trumps steel, and the Jedi's ability to deflect blaster bolts elevates the saber beyond mere weaponry. But if we're talking about narrative significance, the answer is more complex. The bat'leth rivals the lightsaber in mythic symbolism. The mek'leth parallels its practicality in real combat. The lurpa mirrors its ritualistic, dramatic storytelling function. And the energy weapons of aliens like the Hirogen prove that Trek has its own take on glowing plasma blades. Where the lightsaber is tied to mysticism and destiny, Star Trek's melee weapons are tied to culture, honor, and survival. One represents the supernatural connection between warrior and force. The other represents the cultural traditions that define civilizations. Why Trek doesn't need a lightsaber? It's tempting to ask why Star Trek never made its own version of a lightsaber a central piece of its universe. But the answer lies in the franchise's core philosophies. Star Wars is mythological at its heart, inspired by samurai films, Arthurian legend, and Joseph Campbell's hero with 1,000 faces. The lightsaber is the Excalibur of that myth. Star Trek, on the other hand, is about exploration, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. Its melee weapons don't need to glow to matter. They're powerful because they tell us who these species are. Klingon weapons are about honor. Vulcan weapons are about ritual. Federation experiments with energy swords remind us that science always pushes boundaries.